right, we are ready to go then. Okay, good morning, everybody. Once again, welcome to our breakout session, Reimagining Student Learning and Assessment with a Social Justice Lens using Disaggregated Data. My name is Manuel Velez. I am the Vice President of the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges, and it is definitely wonderful to be here with you this morning to have this great conversation. I am here with an amazing group of people who have been working hard throughout the last several weeks to come up with this great presentation, and I'd love to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. So let me go ahead and do that, and we'll start with the ways that they're listed on the screen. Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Pape, and I'm faculty. I'm Department Chair for Computer Information Systems at De Anza College, and I also have the pleasure of being Student Learning Outcome Coordinator there. Davina?
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm Davina Burns-Peters. I proudly come from San Bernardino Valley College, where I'm the current Academic Senate President, but also serving on accreditation, and really excited to be part of this team this morning. And so I'll go over to Suji.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Suji Venkatraman. I'm adjunct and part-time faculty at Skyline College, San Mateo Community College District, and also Academic Senate member. And I'm happy to be here with my colleagues to present what we have. Dr. Michelle?
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Vogel-Trout. I teach psychology at Mount Santa Sana Community College. Happy to be here. I am also serving as an Executive Senate President for Academic Senate and on the Accreditation Committee, and happy to be part of this conversation as well. And also on our current accreditation process and visit. We have a visit coming up next year. So welcome and thank you for being here for this opportunity to engage in great dialogue.
Definitely. And again, as I've said, this is an amazing team who have really put together a wonderful session for us. This is a breakout of the session overall. Certainly our focus is going to be on the ACCJC standards, the new 2024 standards that have kicked in this year. But our focus is going to be specifically on social justice and how that particularly works in relation to the new standards in terms of certainly accreditation and certainly in terms of the learning outcomes that we use in terms of accreditation. It's interesting, certainly the new social justice standards have gained a lot of attention, certainly in the last year. I'm sure a lot of us have heard conversation as these social justice standards have been coming in. In fact, in 2023, I think we had several colleges in the California Community College system already trying out these new standards, already piloting the social justice standards as well. And so it's great to see how these social justice standards are ultimately evolving and how they're coming up and how they're beginning to certainly have an effect in terms of accreditation. Now, there certainly is a lot of questions and a lot of conversation around the social justice standards, and certainly specifically how we apply social justice standards to our accreditation process, and certainly how we apply them to our learning objectives. And that is going to be our focus today, is to certainly help out to understand better how we apply this concept of social justice to learning outcomes, how we can use that in the accreditation process, and certainly how we can use that in our own iCerts. Michelle?
Yeah, I'd like to add for y'all who are here, we did our best to put together a presentation that is really driven to spark your curiosity and get you excited about the process of assessment. Sounds kind of counterintuitive, right? But also the bigger picture of what we do at the local level and in our classrooms and how we structure things and how that fits into accreditation. So your invitation today is to be on your own personal mission and journey of like taking away the nuggets that speak to you, really showing up with a place of curiosity, and also making sure that you give yourself the space to be vulnerable and recognize that that's where we're coming from. We're just a bunch of folks who are passionate about a similar topic. And so we're bringing in examples of where we see socially just things happening in terms of edits and updates that we make. And we're here to give those to you as just things to share, to hopefully make you more excited and inspired to go and take that work back to your home sites. So with that, we will transition. I'll turn it over to Davina.
Yeah, so in our conversations, we, as has already been shared, we really want to frame this from a perspective that transitioning how we approach and understand and frame the accreditation standards, and with the emphasis of the social justice aspect. And you will see throughout our presentation this emphasis on how how some of the tools that we present can be used to support that work. And so this slide is really just about kind of introducing that forward thinking process. You'll see that it's really about a reflective process, right? Looking at what we've done, checking those results, just like we do with our student populations, right? Doing that with our own processes as well. What was that outcome? What can we take away from that? And then planning out what we can do differently. So this is a pretty well-known process for us as educators. It really is just a continuous improvement cycle of reflection and diving into the data, diving into reflection and planning for the next steps. And I think we can go to the next slide. And here, as we were having our discussions, we really talked about how do we make the connection? When you think about accreditation, sometimes it's, for some, it might be that big, scary committee that's on campus, and it might be a little bit of an unknown to others. For some faculty, it might be, how do I fit into this big picture? What can I do? And what does it mean for me? So we thought we would take some time to provide some transition of what accreditation has looked like in the past, where it's heading in terms of standards, as well as looking at what the overall perspective and framework is of the social justice policy within the accreditation, ACCJC. So there was an evolution that occurred. And so in the social justice policy itself, it really moved from talking about diversity in general to really diving into social justice, which is very action-oriented, action-based. And we've moved in terms of the accreditation process. We're moving from, did I do that? Checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. I've got these documents. Let's just get them attached. And we have hundreds of pages of evidence, to really moving into an appreciative inquiry process, which Michelle's going to talk about later and kind of define that out for us. There's also the point of intention. What is the purpose of accreditation? What is driving this work? And again, we've already talked about moving from that checklist to an actual inquiry perspective. And so looking at acknowledging and addressing the social and structural inequities that exist, and just facing them, right? That they do exist. We know they exist. So being open and to not being afraid of it and talking about it. And then on the accreditation process, when we look at the intention, it's to move away from, did we do that? Did we not do that? And moving into, let's take that data and let's dig into it, disaggregate it, get some perspective on it, and move into that analysis phase. And last, looking at the alignment, if you look at the overview of the policy on social justice from ACCJC, when you look at that, they're really looking at a mission appropriate interrogation of practices and outcomes. So how is that mission? Are we looking at our mission, and is it actually driving our practices and our outcomes with a social justice lens? And then on the accreditation application part, so you can see that, one is about the policy and the other part is about the actual process. So in the alignment process, we're looking at, not just having equity in our college mission statement. Many of us probably have recently experienced a mission statement being revised and intention being made to include that equity component, but really looking at the practices and the outcomes within all of our standards. And is the mission really reflecting what we're doing? Is it driving what we're doing on our campuses? So that may still lead you to wonder, how does that apply to me, and what can I do about that? So we're excited to tell you more. Michelle.
Thank you, Davina. So we wanted to give you a snapshot of some pretty hefty materials that you can find within our reference page, but also locally on our different constituency sites. For this presentation, we're focusing in on some very specific things. So we are really highlighting several of the social justice policy principles and how they then fit into the 2024 standards. We recognize that some colleges are still using the 2014 standards, so we've kept that information in there so that you can see how it aligns to both versions. Our focus today will be more on emerging into that 2024 standard approach with the forward-thinking framework. We've aligned your eligibility requirements that come through our ACCJC constituents as well. And then we have our 10+1 matters in how they align to those social justice principles. So we're hoping that this just provides more of a clarity roadmap of how you can see your purpose in this as you're doing this work and on the ground as it goes into this bigger picture. So for us, it was really taking a good time to kind of digest and discuss what things were like, how we got to where we're at now, the things that we're doing locally at our own respective institutions, and where we had some overlap. And in our conversation as a team, we really saw that this stuff is coming together. If we really want to have socially just demonstrated outcomes for students, for our community, for our institutions within our accreditation report, then we really need to bring a lot of things together. We need to start synthesizing. So program review is something that I think has evolved rather quickly, to say, in the educational world. But at the same time, I don't know that we have a full cultural appreciation for the value that program review has and how we contribute to that overall accreditation approach. So this is just kind of a diagram saying that we believe all these things are coming together, and we have some suggestions and some conversation starters related to like frameworks for conversations, and that's the appreciative inquiry we'll talk about, and also how you might be able to implement some AI software to support the work that you're doing. So just to kind of give us a reminder of visually where we come from and where we come in as faculty is that circular diagram there that has our course outcomes, disaggregated data, assignments, assessments, and evaluation. That's what we're doing at our program level, right? And in that process, we're taking chunks of that in our cycles and then ultimately synthesizing that and making meaning through interpretation in the program review. And that ultimately then gets put into the narratives of our accreditation reports, like the ICERs and the midterm reports. So you might be thinking potentially, depending on where you are in your journey, is what could this data look like? Where does the disaggregated data part come in? And so I just wanted to share from my lived experience at my college, a couple snapshots of data that could provide opportunities for curiosity. And then we'll move into that to transition into an example from Mary so you can see it at a very localized level. So we can disaggregate our data in a number of ways. I know for us historically, we had started very basic and we were just looking at disaggregation of data by our sites. And then we slowly evolved because that led to more questions and curiosities into other types of disaggregated data to really allow us to see things. So initially, when we were really new to this, we were trying to see how our students were faring across our sites. And so then we moved into modality and courses, student demographics, and so much more. So these are, again, just snapshots of what it could look like. This is a sample of disaggregated data by student race. And for our college, between 13 and 19, we had some general databases publicly accessible through our college, but they were nowhere near built out to what we have now. What we have now in our college is really representative of all the work we put in because of the process of going through it iteratively and reflecting and finding out where we needed to make more meaning and more do more work for our students. So again, just an example, this is across psychology courses. You can see the course numbers at the top, and then we start to see how they're faring across courses, and then within their distinct demographic that they've selected. We have one here where further, once we realized we had some different groups of students that could be served better and supported differently, we then started looking at those and targeting those in subsequent reviews. And so this is an example for one with disaggregated data for our African-American students and what that looks like for their psychology courses. And these are, I'm pulling these from, extracting them from our program review in case you're wondering where this data came from. And here's another one for our Hispanic student population. So we were able to use this to really think through what was going on. And ultimately, what I'm hoping you take away from this is we have gaps and we have disparities. And then what are we going to do about that? How can we be curious about that? What can we, dream up in terms of what we're doing in the classroom and in our curriculum to make it better for all? So I wanted to pause here, give Mary an opportunity to show this really cool resource that works for faculty specific.
If you please click into that. impact report. And the first page is actually will give you some background to the report should you have some questions. So I wanted to leave it there, but the interesting page is page number 2. And that is a very visual look at the gap. The blue line you're seeing there on the orange is saying that we have a problem with, we have a gap there and we need to do something about it. Interestingly enough, at the end of every quarter, available to each faculty and emailed to them is a show of the previous quarter and how the faculty member, what their disproportionate data would look like for that quarter. Right here, the show of data I'm giving to you is one single program from summer of 2022 until last quarter, which was fall of 2023. I want to take a moment here too, as this data got pushed out. Some of our newer faculty or newish faculty came up to me and were quite distraught over this because they said, I tried my best and I haven't done anything. And I counseled them that think back for a moment here. For each student whose data is represented here, it's taken years for them to be supported or not supported in their academic efforts. What we are trying to do, each one of us every day as we go online for our Zoom sessions or we go into the classroom, what we're trying to do is throw that pebble into the water and see it ripple in the positive direction. So keep that in mind, please. But yes, we are very lucky to have this lovely show of data, very visual, and we can see where it is that we really have to work on. And we also realize that 5 years from now, the bars might be different. They'll be in different places. There'll be a different group that needs our attention. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mary. So you've got gaps, you have disparities between groups or different modalities or however you disaggregated your data. And now you're like, oh, shucks, what do I do? This is our opportunity to really invite you to consider a couple different things, idea starters, conversation starters, whatever you want to call them. But appreciative inquiry is one of those. And then, as we know, AI is just taking over in so many different ways. And we have many ways that we could see this as being a productive vessel for us and supporting the work that we do as instructors and faculty. So just really quickly, and I'm not going to spend time to read through these questions for you in this session, but as they're on the screen, what I'm hoping you take away from this AI model is that what you're seeing is you're taking this opportunity to appreciate the work that we do and get curious and a little bit critical or truth-seeking with yourself for where things could be improved. And so the prompts that we provided on the screen are just simple examples of questions you can ask as you're going through that exploration process for yourself. And ultimately, that's, again, forward thinking. Where can we find opportunities to do better for our students, to empower them to also do better and support them to do better? And then, Mary, did you want to just mention which one you'll highlight?
I'm going to highlight here ChatGPT, which is probably the best known one, but realize that GPT/4, they're going to be it's going to be improving all along. There's no such thing as it staying still in time. And then some others are mentioned on here that you might want to look into. They are regular applications that have been infused with artificial intelligence. And you saw us on our funnel slide using Canva today. So those are just some ideas for the future. So on the next slide, what we tried to do is can generative AI reframe student learning outcome statements. The original statement, which I just stole from the one from the English department, the original statement is listed there. Can generative AI improve on that statement? So I put it in straight as it was and didn't get too much out. But then I started adding words, nurturing the whole student. That's one of our values. I put in inclusion, which is one of our buzzwords today for looking and focusing on equity. I have critical thinking there because it is one of the bullets on our mission statement and has also turned into one of our ISLRs. So I put those in, and then I got something more out. I got some special words. cultivate the complete development of students by engaging in writing as a multi-step process, encompassing deliberate planning and revising while considering a range of purposes, audiences, and rhetorical strategies, with a focus on inclusion and critical thinking. And I saw when I got that back out that I was thinking about what can I do to instill, or to help my students to show social justice as I'm planning for the class, as I'm developing activities. But ChatGPT also saw that I should be instilling these values also in my students as I go along. So next slide, please, is where the original SLO is stated there, what the generative GPT told me. I noticed the word practice in the original SLO. Notice the word cultivate, because that's what I'm supposed to do. We heard this morning in our keynote address, foster, a synonym for that word there. We want to foster that. So the 4 of us yesterday, 5 of us, took the original and what the AI suggested, and we played with it and we worked it, and we came up with a revised SLO, which was centered on what skill the students would be showing us at the end of the course. And then what you see there is what we came up with as the revised SLO, thanks to generative AI. Any questions? So let's try this. I didn't hear
And
you.
do you mind if I emphasize, Mary, this idea that we're saying using the AI as a support tool, right? We still felt the need to use our own brains, our own cognitive working power to get to an SLO that made sense. So it's a place to support, but also move forward into a better version of what we can do organically.
Thank you. Just what we want our students to do when they use generative AI. Next slide. Okay. Taking this a step further is acquiring ideas for development of socially just assessments and activities. Can generative AI help us in that? So I asked GPT how to assess through the social justice lens the student learning outcome of practice writing as a multi-step, etc. If you'll, yes. And it came up with some ideas here that I wanted. It gave me points. I really appreciate this. This was for an English assignment. I teach computer science. I have done the same thing with computer science. It gives me new ideas of where to start their activities for my students. Not using the same ones that I have used, but use something different. Have my focus on it being an activity, and my focus on watching for collaborative learning. Have my focus on flexible assessment methods, reflective assignments, equitable grading criteria. First step of that is to make sure my students know how they will be assessed. And inclusive classroom environment. It's a process. It's kind of a for me to go through, read, and then take that in as I decide to create a new activity or assessment and look at the class all over again or redesign. So I also like to come back to this slide, and I invite each one of you to play with ChatGPT and just have fun with it and see what it comes up with you, both for maybe a rewording of your student learning outcome and more perhaps to give you ideas about a new way of looking at activities, alias assessments. Next slide.
Thank you, Mary. So I'm going to talk about how I had made some changes to student assessment methods using appreciative inquiry in my course that I teach at the college. So I want to thank one of my colleagues at Skyline who introduced me to a grading contract from the book by Joe Fieldman on grading for equity. So what it is that Michelle, samples assignment syllabus. So what is that? I was very unhappy about the traditional grading system of points, where I've been noticing the last 10 years of my career that students are failing more in being penalized for less work done or work not done. I wanted to appreciate their learning process and provide input and encourage them to have a better success in whatever course they take with me. So in that process, when my colleague introduced me to grading contract, I decided to jump in with curiosity, humility, vulnerability, and apprehension, anxiety, and all that with my students in a summer course, and completely shifted from a traditional grading policy to a non-traditional grading policy of grading contract. So I first drafted a letter to my students in the syllabus talking about what that grading policy is. And in that, I mentioned that it is the task that they complete and how they complete it and how and when they complete it. And they get to decide how and when they complete it. They take charge of what level of grade they want to earn. So the 3 assignments work that I had given them were exit tickets, usually a Canvas. This is for an online course. Large group discussions on Canvas, I call them as exit tickets. They're exit tickets because they decide to do how many exit tickets they want in order to earn a grade level. I'll show in the table in the next page. And then also the final projects, they have the choice of which assignment they want to complete and at what level they want to earn the completion. So the earning completion is a high pass, pass, or needs work, or submitted, not submission. So then the caveat in here is how it is equitable is that the 3 things is I provide revision in their final projects, feedbacks for them based on the grading rubric I have and the guidelines I have given. And then also there's a bump up incentive, for example, at a level, if they finish 10 exit tickets and they have done all 3 final projects, I take the initiative to bump their grade to a higher level. And then the exit tickets are complete and incomplete when they follow the rubric. So here's the level of coursework that they can complete in order to earn the level that they want to earn. So for example, if I wanted to earn a grade level A, I have these components that I have to complete, but then in each component, there's a different level. I make the choice. So for example, if I want to earn a high pass in all 3 projects, I need to do that in order to earn a letter A. So I take initiative, the student takes the initiative and the power to earn the grade that they wish to earn. So I handed the power over to the students instead of taking the power to myself. Next point, thank you. So here's a sample assignment that I had generated, completely changed it, that aligns with the student learning outcome of the course. This is at the course level. And so I had given clear instructions of what is required in that final assignment. And in the reflection process, I connected to the student learning outcomes, what they are meeting. And so this is again connected to the rubric where the student learning outcomes are explained. Next part, Michelle. Okay, so here are the rubrics that I had created. At this moment, I have not used generative AI to change these things. This is just a sample. And so here I had inputted the student learning outcomes of the course, also connected to the institutional learning outcomes of our college with regards to critical learning and creative thinking, cultural sensitivity. Those are the institutional learning outcomes that are available in a rubric format in our college website. So I had connected those with the requirements of the assignment, and then I had placed what level they can earn by completing a particular assignment, a high pass and a pass. So for example, if a student had sent in a draft of this final ethnography and I had reviewed it and given feedback, detailed feedback with regard to the rubric and also the guidelines, I have given the power for that student to decide if they want to move up and earn a higher level grade. They can revise that assignment and submit it as a final assignment. And then I get to read that final work and provide that level of grade that they earn because of their level of earning of course content, mastering the course content, and also making changes because they decided to enhance their learning. So a complete power handed over to the students. So when I want to share the comparison between the traditional and a non-traditional grading rubric. Michelle? So here's the same assignment ethnography in spring of 23 that had points, right? Which the rating is exemplary and emerging and developing. So the total assignment had about 30 points, and then at each level they're earning points. And I had noticed that when this was provided, students, when they, at that time, I didn't have revision policy, or even if I did have revision policy, because the students are not understanding where they are lacking and what's happening in their learning process. I never got to assess their improvement. So they were penalized for no reason of their fault, for missing whatever part of the rubric. And that really frustrated me because I knew the students are capable of mastering content and showcasing their mastery. So this is a complete, and I completely shifted this rubric to what I showed you, which is the high pass and pass rubric, and no points at all. So in my courses since summer, I don't have any points for my assignments. It is a pass or a high pass and also a complete or an incomplete. Michelle? So what I wanted to share is that through appreciative inquiry, I realized in the summer, students struggled and I struggled because I made changes along with my students by inquiring with them and learning from them what worked and what is not working, what is, and from that inquiry process, I have changed some things in my rubric and also provided other ways, meaningful communications with my students. And therefore, I had a student who really was scared in taking my course in summer, ended up taking 4 of my courses in fall and completed very successfully because she really appreciated the fact that I had provided that equitable assessment process, handed it over to the students instead of having a traditional assessment process. So that's my journey, and this journey is still moving forward, and it is not done yet, and it is not complete. And so I'm learning along with my students as I move forward in this process. Thank you.
Michelle, before we move on, we do have a couple of comments in the chat. Do you mind if I share them right now?
Go for it.
And I'll share the one from Veronica Avila because it seems related specifically to Suji's part of the presentation. Veronica mentions, I use grading contracts in my class, and I find that having students state their intended grade for the quarter at the beginning of the quarter encourages them to strive to work towards that grade. There's some science to this, but I can't think of the research at the moment. I do add a caveat stating the obvious, just because they want that grade is contingent upon meeting the definitions on the contract. We did also have a question, I think it came during Mary's part of the presentation, from Vincent Poturica. I'm curious how faculty at your college feel about using AI to draft SLO statements. Was this strategy supported by the Senate and the folks involved with SLOs at the institution? And I don't know if that was directed at Mary specifically, or if Vincent was inviting others to comment on their academic senate.
We haven't really discussed. We're still in the middle of our conversation in academic senate about AI altogether. And I want to underscore that using ChatGPT is kind of like having a chance to get together with a colleague and ask a question and start a discussion, get ideas. And it is the same thing that you hope that your student might do with a generative GPT. It's just a starting point. And, looking at that blank piece of paper is sometimes difficult. So it's nice to get extra ideas out. The one thing about ChatGPT is it has access to so much data. Makes it very helpful sometimes, thinking of something that you didn't think of or your colleague did not think of. Does that sort of answer it?
We'll see if it does, he'll give us a thumbs up.
Okay.
Janie says, I'd love to get a copy of Suji's letter to her students about the contract grading with these policies. This slideshow will be available at the ASCCC website after this presentation. So you're more than welcome to download the slideshow from there, and you should have access to those. Is that correct, Suji? I don't know if I'm speaking for your documents.
Yes, it's correct. It is in the Google Drive where it can be accessed when they click the link to the slide, I believe. So yeah. Or
So you,
the participant can email me directly. I can send a PDF of that document too.
there you go. Thanks, Suji.
Mhm.
Okay,
Just
Michelle.
confirming that's the case for all the hyperlinks throughout the presentation. Once you download the presentation, you should have the ability to click on all of those and access them in readable format.
Okay, so we've spent some time talking about, the process, overlaying appreciative inquiry, and AI in ways to help us from a faculty and and others as well. We're speaking a lot from a faculty perspective as a group who is on the ACCJC Accreditation Committee, but it can be applied in other spaces and by others as well. But what you've seen, and Suji, as you were presenting, some of the notes that I made and Mary as well, is the word curiosity, right? Curiosity is what starts this conversation. And when we become curious about our results, our data, our outcomes, what we're doing to support students, how we can better support them, things that we've talked about is that student choice, empowerment, revision opportunities. But the one that really stood out to me and I wanted to highlight before we go into this is talking about the feedback, right? We are a key part in ensuring that we are interacting with our students, giving them feedback, giving them that support. That is part of social justice. That is work that we can do in our classroom today without having to go through the processes and procedures of, big projects, getting approval from senates. Those are things that we can do in the classroom every single day through our work. So when we continue to look at the equity talk to equity walk, and I'm going to start off this slide and the rest of the presenters will join in. We really wanted to make sure that we talked about how language matters. Language matters in how we read things. We know that our course syllabi, our assignments, our activities are sometimes laden with these the lingo that we utilize, right, that we're comfortable with, that is not always necessarily easily digestible by our students, understood by our students. Maybe it's a different I think of it as layman terms, right? I come from a therapy background, and as a therapist, you can really jump into lingo very, very quickly. And the client or the patient is like, wait, hold on, just tell me how that applies to me, right? So thinking of our assignment language, our course syllabi language, from that same perspective of what does this say? It makes sense to me. But consider having students look at that, looking at shared language and definitions with our students, incorporating them into our processes, hearing from them what words are not making sense to you. Okay, if they don't make sense to you or you, then let's talk about that. Let me have some dialogue and make some adjustments, and being very clear and direct with our language, rather than, on a case-by-case basis, I might make this adjustment, right? There's other language that we can be very clear. Adjustments will be made after having a conversation with you, or giving them timelines and timeframes of what's expected. And I see the conversation about contracts in the chat. Those are important because they're very clear and they're direct, but also making sure that it's language that, again, makes sense to students, but includes their perspective and is also very warm, welcoming, and brings them into that. And that will lead us down the route of having that real true integration of social justice within our work. And so the last piece that I'll say about that is, as we finish up this conversation, you might be wondering, we didn't talk about the actual term social justice. What does that term mean, right? And we really wanted to emphasize that as we've had these conversations today, the examples that have been talked about, that hopefully it starts that definition being developed for you and yourself, and that you're seeing that here's a few tools that we can use to begin that journey and to begin that application process. And I'll leave the rest to my teammates.
Thank you so much, Davina. I really only want to emphasize with what you're saying and sharing with our colleagues, Davina, that the real and full integration, it means that we're actually engaging in that authentic, vulnerable, introspective, and intentional work. So for this to truly make the shift that we're looking for, this magnified shift, right? There's a reason at the state level through accreditation, we're talking through ways we can take those 2014 standards and move them into this 2024 vision of the standards for forward thinking and using reflection instead of checkboxing. You know, all the things that we have or don't have, it's less punitive when we go from an exploration model. And so that has to happen intentionally, and it has to happen with each one of us. Like if you think of each faculty member working on one course, one SLO, one assignment, we start there, right? We're making slivers of effort that ultimately magnify into making this cultural shift of how we serve students, how we support students, and how we help them meet their success, scholastic success opportunity or goals and achievements. So I'm going to pause there as well. I'm actually wondering, based on time, do we want to move to Q&A? Because I can't see the chat, so I've been seeing numbers, but I'm not sure what we've gotten to so far.
There's about 15 minutes left, so I think we definitely want to make sure that we have time for Q&A. I've been answering and responding to some of the questions, but as soon as you're ready, we can definitely open it up to the rest of the audience.
Awesome. Maybe just a couple more, again, ideas where you could start to add equitable based language, socially just policies or descriptions. And there's many more. We just want to give you a few more ideas, some nuggets to work with when you go back home, and everybody's in a different spot on their journey. So some of these you might have already done, and other ones you can target those as being your next venture. So we'll leave it at that. Suji, Mary, Davina, Manuel, did you want to say anything on this one before we transition to Q&A?
I did want to mention something. I think as we're looking at student learning outcomes through the lens of social justice and how we get there, I think I especially tune into what Suji gave us today, because celebrating when our students have achieved the student learning outcomes is such an important part of their road. It gives the students confidence and the feeling of moving forward. And I think also making sure that we get to that end when students know that they have achieved the student learning outcomes. I think asking them early on in the course, by whatever means you have, an anonymous little quiz that Canvas is so nice to provide to us, and figure out if they feel like they belong to the class, if they feel that they are engaged, and if they feel that they're moving forward towards achieving the student learning outcomes. So I think that's an important end for us as instructors to keep our minds on. I used to say, as I introduced the idea of student learning outcomes to individual faculties, it's what we always do. You walk into the classroom and you go, what do I want the students to come away with today? And you walk out of the classroom seeing if you did or not. Now we're being more specific, and we want to make sure that we've given the support needed to each and every one of those students. And that's how that has changed.
I would like to add, I just had in this moment, a reflexive moment about the student-inspired elements of social justice was, I remember this Zoom conversation with students at the start of fall semester, when the student who took my summer class came in, because she was in this course too. And she mentioned that she's like telling the students straight away, like, don't worry about the grading policy, because Suji is going to completely take you hands-on until the end. You don't have to worry about it, and just play with it. I was like just stunned to see that she was inspired by the work, and she's inspiring other students to stay on in the course instead of getting discombobulated, because as students are so how do I say it? They're being trained with this traditional way of assessment that even a slight shift in a non-traditional way just throws them into a loop. I noticed students get thrown into a loop. And she was like, no, do not get off the bandwagon, just stay in and you'll get there. And so her inspiring other students to trust the process was just very humbling to listen to that. I just wanted to share that, because that is social justice too. It's not just a single faculty doing the work. It is also connecting the students' reflective moments with other students is also probably very important, because that of course leads to the program learning outcomes and all that other multiple wheels in the bandwagon. I just wanted to share that. It just clicked to me right now. So.
Well, I'll definitely add some comments as well before we finish with some Q&A and open it up for the rest of the audience. I think definitely when we're talking about social justice and how it is that we're trying to define it in relation to SLOs and to accreditation, I definitely focus on two things. I think the first and foremost is disaggregated data, right? When we talk about social justice, I think part of what we need to understand is that it's important to look at data through the lens of the communities that we're particularly interested in or that we're serving. And without disaggregated data, we really are working with an incomplete picture. So part of our idea is to really give us the most vivid, comprehensive picture using data in order for us to really say that we're using or applying a social justice lens when we're looking at student learning objectives, and certainly things such as success rates and retention rates, and so on and so forth. I also definitely focus on the idea, certainly, of appreciative inquiry, and how appreciative inquiry definitely is a departure from, you might say, this more rigid process of accreditation, where there is room for a more holistic view of the student and the relationship between the student and, let's say, the work and how they succeed in our classrooms. And so when I think about social justice through this particular learning outcome lens, it's through disaggregated data, and it is definitely through a more holistic approach that allows us to remove ourselves from the more traditional structures that you might say still retain those Eurocentric norms, and allows us to explore more structures that, if you don't mind me using the term, right, is more decolonized, right, and allows us to be much more holistic in the way that we view our students and the way that we view our success rates. So we are getting some questions here. We've got about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to open it up for questions, and we'll start off with Janie Skinner's, I believe it's more of a comment, but I'll go ahead and read it. Janie says, the disaggregated data helps us as faculty counteract our recall bias. Definitely, I think that's a very great point. We remember the students who made it to the end of the semester and their experiences in our classes more than the students who left in week 3. But the opportunity gaps may be showing up in who is dropping, and we may need to understand that better to give an example. That's a wonderful point. I think that's a great example of how disaggregated data certainly helps us out. Does anybody else want to comment on that statement?
Well, I think your point about the disaggregated is important, right? It's not only enough to look at the disaggregated of those data of those who have successfully passed our courses or have dropped at that census date, but when we're looking at those students that we lost, as in this comment says, 3 weeks into the semester, who are those students? And we need to be able to disaggregate that as well. And I know that those are conversations that require a lot of collaboration and require help of our institutional effectiveness and research departments, but they're really important conversations to have and to advocate for and support if you don't have access to that. And just keep digging deeper, because you're right, Manuel, without it, we don't have a complete picture.
Going to mention to that point as well, one practice that my college does more recently through conversations and questions that came about this topic is we now have like a checkbox exit interview for anyone who withdraws from a course. There's a series of options. They can just say like a personal matter, financial status, no longer need for my degree plan. There's a variety of them, but it helps us understand maybe where they were at the time when they did withdraw. And so we haven't yet been able to do anything with that data because we just started this practice, but we foresee that being very insightful.
Michelle, I'll add to that. We have that practice as well at San Bernardino Valley College, and we are actually in that stage of we've been very blessed to bring on some additional research support, and we have been looking at that data for those students that we're losing at week 2, week 3, week 4, and now the next phase is we know that there was a financial need, but what does that mean for the student? How do we now go to the next step and figure out, is that a personal financial need? Did they have to go back to work? Did they have to pick up extra work for family purposes? Was the financial aid not enough to cover their needs in the campus? So, but those are the exciting conversations to have. I think it's a little bit, I'm not a data nerd, but I do appreciate how it takes us to just the next question, which leads us back to the theme of this conversation, which is appreciative inquiry. And that is where our standards are heading, and that's what they're asking us to do. And so I think it's a great way to tie that in for sure.
Okay, we have about maybe 5 more minutes left. I'm gonna see if hopefully I don't open up a whole can of worms here, but is there any comments at all in terms of artificial intelligence? I want to start off by saying, right, Mary is very much correct in saying that artificial intelligence, as we're presenting it here, is the beginning of the conversation. It shouldn't be seen as the end of the conversation. But certainly I understand that some people have a lot of questions or perhaps concerns around artificial intelligence. Any comments, any questions on the role of AI in relation to our SLOs? Is anybody going to try to use ChatGPT to see how it works and how it begins the conversations? I guess nobody wants to jump into that. No, I don't see much. Oh, go ahead, Suji.
As Mary had mentioned, when we did the revising SLO with the original one and the ChatGPT one yesterday, it was mind-boggling for me. I just want to share to see how ChatGPT had created that process. But then what was interesting was, for me, that was just a slate to work on that ChatGPT gave me to be more authentic in the student learning outcomes and writing it. So what I was thinking I will be doing it next time is I always struggle with my rubric of what's the ask in the different levels with the high pass and the pass and that. I think I am vulnerable and to enough to kind of use ChatGPT to give me that disaggregation of what do I expect in high pass by giving what I have in the rubric main item, and then ask ChatGPT whether what is expected in a high pass and pass, and then come back and revise with my using my brain. So I am really ready to do that, I think, because I want to learn. I want to see how ChatGPT will help me with that. So because we all, colleagues have less time, and anyway, so I just wanted to share that.
Veronica Avila in the chat is thanking you because she says that she loves the idea of using ChatGPT. So Veronica, let us know how that works out. Send us a message and see if you end up liking the results of the ChatGPT usage. So I'll comment on that very quickly as well, because I am certainly one of those who's a little skeptical of artificial intelligence, though not as much as I think as some others. My wife, Maria, who is also a professor at Miracosta College, is very much against AI. She always says like FAI, and I always get out of ChatGPT and say, how do I respond to someone who says FAI? But in any case, I understand that there are certainly a lot of concerns, but I also kind of really emphasize the idea that ChatGPT or AI can certainly serve as a basis to start the conversations. And it's always when I use ChatGPT to see what it comes up with, I do feel that the language that it's using is in some way superficial. But I also understand that it's my job to jump in there and delve into that language and make it much more in depth. And so I definitely think that there's room for AI. Don't let my wife Maria hear me say that. But I think that it's a place where we can begin the conversation. It perhaps can point us to some ideas, but it's up to us, the humans, if you will, to really delve into those ideas.
And Manny, following up on that too, I hope that the more I use ChatGPT, the more I will understand how to help my students use it in a positive way. So that's another one of my goals personally as I was playing with it for this presentation.
Okay, well, I think we have about 2 more minutes left. So if there are any other questions, now would be the time to ask them, or any last comments. Otherwise, I will ask Michelle if she has any last comments before we close it up.
My last comment is just thank you for joining us today. We assume that you came to this session because you were hoping to find something that sparked some curiosity and some venture for yourself. And hopefully you found at least one nugget. We're not looking for you to do all of this at once. We are all individuals trying to make our slivers in, our dent in it, right? And I think if we all collectively do that work, that's where we get to buy into our keynote speaker, to the invitation of the national movement, right? That's the whole goal, us doing a little bit, each of us, and we're slowly moving the needle at our respective institutions. And then slowly as a state, we are then moving the needle for all the students that we serve. So it might be a little Pollyanna for us to put this out there like that, but we truly do believe that it's part of our journey. We're lifelong learners too. So even this conversation that we're having right now could be very different this time next year, because we will all have learned something new, and ChatGPT and other things will have evolved. But what's constant? Appreciative inquiry. It's coming from the same lens every single time. It's your space to be vulnerable, open with yourself, be a truth seeker, and find things that you can do better for your students by using your curiosity as your superpower against your own implicit biases and other things that you're building in because you naturally have developed those over time. But that curiosity allows you to take a step back and just look at things a little bit differently and do it with others, right? Be vulnerable with others, because that has probably been the second biggest superpower for all of us, is to come across disciplines, come across different places and different perspectives and the different students we serve and say, hey, let's try this, or have you tried this? So please take it wherever you go on your own journey, and then, let us know how it goes, see what we can do to support, and vice versa. And
yes, any last comments from any one of our panelists? Though you've already done some excellent comments, so no pressure. Okay, well, we are definitely out of time. Thank you so much, everybody, for your attendance and your participation. I want to leave you with Vincent's last comment. I won't read it because we're out of time, but make sure you read that comment because I do think it's an important one. But thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the SLO symposium. Hopefully, I'll see some of you at some of the upcoming sessions. Have a wonderful week and a wonderful rest of the semester. Thank you, everybody.